Hello everyone, and welcome to our channel. Today we have a heartfelt story that will move your soul and inspire you with its message of resilience and true love. Before we begin, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming stories. Now, sit back, relax, and let yourself be carried away by the magic of today's story. New York City, the city that never sleeps, where dreams are made, and where lonely hearts can be easily swallowed by the endless crowds. Miller's Restaurant, one of the most luxurious spots in Manhattan, glowed under massive crystal chandeliers. Elegant guests dined on marble floors. The clink of glasses blended softly with the lingering strains of live jazz from a gleaming Steinway grand piano in the center of the room. And among all that splendor, Emily Carter, a young waitress, quietly went about her work. Her brown hair, tied neatly back, her soft brown eyes showing a glimmer of fatigue, she moved swiftly between tables, serving guests with a polite, practiced smile. More than 10 hours on her feet. Her legs ached as if made of stone. When the last customer finally left, Emily exhaled a breath of relief. The dimmed lights cast long, blurred shadows across the polished marble floors. Seeing that no one was paying attention, Emily walked toward the small stage where the grand piano sat in dignified silence, like an old, patient friend. She gently set down her tray and sat carefully on the piano bench, giving her aching legs a brief moment of rest. Her slender fingers brushed lightly across the smooth surface of the piano. For one fleeting moment, Emily closed her eyes, memories rushing back. Crisp autumn afternoons in Boston, the comforting sight of her father smiling proudly as she played. A single note rang softly under her fingertips. But that fragile dream was shattered almost instantly. Oh, look at that. The little waitress thinks she's a concert pianist now. A shrill voice cut through the stillness like broken glass. Emily startled, quickly turning. Standing before her was Vanessa Moore, the girlfriend of Christopher Miller, the owner of the restaurant. Vanessa wore a deep crimson evening gown, sparkling high heels, and her lips, painted a fierce red, curled into a smirk of pure disdain. Behind her, a few other elegantly dressed women followed, their gazes dripping with mockery and contempt. Emily stood up abruptly, bowing her head in apology. "I'm sorry. I was just resting for a moment." Vanessa strutted closer, her eyes sharp as daggers. "Resting? On a $200,000 piano? Are you serious?" Laughter erupted behind her. Emily bit her lip hard, her hands gripping the hem of her uniform skirt tightly. Her face flushed deep red with humiliation. Vanessa crossed her arms, her voice slicing cruelly through the air. "Do you even know your place? You belong serving tables, not touching things worth more than your entire life." Each word was like a slap against Emily's dignity. A few other staff members glanced over, but no one dared to intervene. Everyone knew how much power Vanessa wielded. One word from her could easily end someone's career at Miller's. Emily lowered her head even more, tears threatening to spill, but she forced them back. She was used to being looked down on. Since the fall from her once privileged life, she had learned how to survive, how to endure. "Don't even think about doing it again," Vanessa sneered coldly, tossing her hair arrogantly as she turned and strutted away, the sharp clack of her heels echoing off the marble. Emily remained frozen there, under the fading chandelier lights, feeling smaller than ever. No one knew that once upon a time, she had been Emily Carter, the golden girl of Boston high society, a piano prodigy who had once performed at grand galas and charity concerts. No one knew that beneath the simple waitress uniform was a heart still beating with music, still holding on desperately to dreams that life had tried so hard to crush. Blinking away the tears, Emily bent down, picked up her tray, and silently walked off the stage. Behind her, the Steinway Grand remained, its glossy surface reflecting the dim light, a silent witness to her humiliation. And somewhere, hidden in the farthest corner of the restaurant, a pair of eyes had been watching everything unfold. Eyes that for the first time flickered with a tiny, unexpected spark. That night, New York turned unusually cold. The gusts of wind slicing through the streets felt like sharp blades against weary shoulders. Emily walked home to the small apartment she shared with two other college girls. Every step felt heavier, each one pressing another stone on her chest. In her mind, Vanessa's scornful voice echoed relentlessly, tearing apart the fragile shell she had spent so long building. She pulled her thin coat tighter around herself and looked up at the cloud-choked night sky. No stars, no light, only darkness stretching endlessly above her, much like the years that followed after she lost everything. Emily Carter had been born into one of the most prestigious families in Boston. Her father, Richard Carter, was a real estate tycoon, respected for both his wealth and his integrity. She grew up in a grand estate by the Charles River, where each morning was greeted with the soft melodies of a piano drifting through the long, marble-floored halls. From the age of 4, Emily had received professional training, not because her family demanded it, but because within her flowed a natural, instinctive love for music. The piano wasn't a duty for Emily. It was her purest joy. When her fingers danced across the keys, the world would stop spinning, leaving only music and dreams in the air. Her father would often sit quietly in the living room, listening to her play, his eyes glowing with pride. Her mother, gentle and beautiful like a ballad in autumn, would stroke Emily's hair and whisper, "You are the greatest gift life has ever given me." But then, everything crumbled. When Emily was 16, a devastating financial disaster struck their family. One major real estate project collapsed spectacularly, dragging the Carter family's empire into ruin. Assets were seized. The Carters' once proud name fell into disgrace. The same people her father had helped for years turned their backs overnight. All that remained were whispers, sneers, and doors slammed in their faces. Before they could recover, tragedy struck again. Her mother, overwhelmed by public shame and grief, fell gravely ill. 6 months later, she passed away silently, leaving Emily and her aging father to struggle alone. Richard Carter, once as strong and steady as a mountain, could not endure the burden much longer. A year after his wife's death, he too slipped away peacefully in his sleep, leaving Emily orphaned. All that remained were a few personal belongings crammed into a battered suitcase. No money, no family, no home. From that point on, Emily made her way to New York, the city of dreams, and also the city that mercilessly crushed dreamers. By day, she studied business administration at a community college, surviving on a small scholarship. By night, she worked at Miller's, the same restaurant she had once only heard mentioned at Glitter and Gallows back in Boston. In her tiny, dimly lit apartment, Emily sat on the edge of her worn-out mattress, pulling off her scuffed shoes, her body aching. She stared up at the cracked, water-stained ceiling, her fingers unconsciously mimicking the motion of playing invisible piano keys. Despite the poverty, despite the humiliation, despite the loneliness, she had preserved something sacred, her heart full of kindness, her pride untouched by bitterness or hate. She whispered to herself, a quiet vow before sleep finally claimed her. "I won't fall, Mom. Dad, even if the whole world turns its back, I will keep walking forward." Outside the fogged-up window, New York kept pulsing, relentless and cold. But somewhere amid the concrete and neon lights, tiny lamps still flickered quietly, just like Emily's heart. The next day, New York City woke under a high, dazzling blue sky. On Fifth Avenue, the crowd surged like an endless river, as if no sorrow had ever touched the city. At Miller's restaurant, a new day began with its usual rhythm. The clink of cutlery, the soft chime of glasses, gentle conversations, and the soothing murmur of jazz. Emily tightened her apron, pulled her brown hair into a neat bun, and quickly blended into the bustling flow of work. As always, she was silent, diligent, unnoticed. But today, a small, seemingly harmless event would disrupt everything. During the busy lunch rush, Mr. Walker, a wealthy regular customer, called Emily over. He was an elderly man, difficult but fair, a frequent guest at the restaurant for his business meetings. When Emily brought out his dessert, Mr. Walker gave her a rare, warm smile and handed her a small, neatly wrapped box. "A little token of thanks for your excellent service, Miss Emily," he said kindly. "It's rare to meet someone with your patience and grace these days." Emily hesitated, flustered. "Sir, you really don't have to." But Mr. Walker simply waved a hand, smiling. "Please take it. You deserve it." The box was light. Inside was a sleek, black fountain pen, engraved with Emily's name. A simple gift, but for Emily, it was like a precious gem found in a barren desert. She bowed deeply and whispered, "Thank you so much." Unfortunately, the scene did not go unnoticed by Vanessa Moore, lounging across the room with a glass of champagne. A cold, predatory smile briefly crossed her perfectly made-up face. Without hesitation, Vanessa glided toward Christopher Miller, who was discussing something with the manager at the bar. She clutched his arm lightly, whispering in a syrupy, calculated tone, "Chris, did you see that? That little waitress just got a gift from a customer. Looked awfully cozy if you ask me. I'm just saying, you might want to keep an eye on her." Christopher frowned. He wasn't naturally suspicious, but in the cutthroat world of business, employees taking advantage of clients wasn't unheard of. His gaze unconsciously shifted toward Emily, who was at that moment carefully tucking the small gift away into a side locker, completely unaware she was being watched. Not long after, Emily was summoned to the office. As she entered the dark, wood-paneled room, she immediately felt the chill in the air. Christopher sat behind his desk, his deep blue eyes cold and unreadable. He didn't waste time. "I heard you accepted a gift from a customer today." Emily stiffened slightly. She hurried to explain. "It was just a small thank you gift, Mr. Miller. Nothing inappropriate. I was simply doing my duty." Christopher cut her off sharply. "Regardless of the reason, you've crossed a line. Miller's is not a place where staff pursue personal gain." Each word fell like an invisible blade, cold, precise, merciless. Emily stood frozen. She wanted to defend herself, to explain, but the words tangled and stuck painfully in her throat. He, the man she silently admired for his strength and ambition, so easily believed malicious whispers and didn't give her even a sliver of trust. She bowed her head, her voice barely audible. "I'm sorry. It won't happen again." Christopher nodded curtly. "Good. You may leave." Emily turned away, her legs trembling. The office door clicked shut behind her with a cold finality, like the slamming of a judge's gavel. Back in the changing room, Emily leaned against the wall, her hands clutching her apron to keep herself from breaking down. It wasn't fear of being fired. It wasn't sadness over a simple gift. It was the betrayal, the humiliation of being seen, judged, as something she was not. She, Emily Carter, who once stood on glittering stages, playing music that touched the hearts of thousands, was now being viewed as little more than a scheming opportunist. More painful than Vanessa's cruelty was Christopher's silent condemnation. Emily bit her lip hard until she tasted blood. But then, she took a deep, shaky breath and lifted her chin. She told herself, "No matter what, I won't give up. I'll prove my worth through dignity and resilience." Outside the window, New York City still shimmered with neon lights. But for Emily, everything had faded into a cold, colorless gray. 3 days later, Miller's restaurant was busier than usual. Tonight was an important night. Christopher Miller was expecting a visit from a secret potential investor. If things went well, Miller's would secure a massive investment and expand nationwide. None of the staff knew exactly who the guest was. Christopher kept everything confidential to ensure no one would treat the guest differently, maintaining the restaurant's usual professional and welcoming atmosphere. As the evening crowd filled the restaurant, a man stepped inside. He wore a worn-out wool coat, a battered hat pulled low over his face, and scuffed leather shoes. He moved slowly, his gaze scanning the room carefully, as if weighing something very important. Several guests frowned in discomfort. A few staff members whispered. No one recognized him, only seeing a shabby figure out of place among the luxury. And inevitably, Vanessa Moore, elegant and arrogant, stormed over, her stiletto heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. With her usual sneer, she blocked the man's path. "I'm afraid this place isn't suitable for someone like you. We serve guests with reservations and proper attire." Her haughty voice rang out, drawing glances from nearby tables. The man simply lowered his head, silent. Vanessa, emboldened by the attention, continued, "If you're looking for free food, perhaps you should try the local shelters." The man's face twitched slightly, but he didn't argue. He only stood there quietly, a deep sorrow flickering in his eyes. Nearby, Emily had just set down her tray when she witnessed the entire scene. Her heart twisted painfully. Without hesitation, she stepped forward, gently positioning herself between Vanessa and the man. "Excuse me, sir. Please allow me to find you a warm table." Vanessa whipped around, glaring. "What do you think you're doing?" Emily remained calm, her voice polite but firm. "This is a restaurant that serves all polite guests. No one here deserves to be humiliated." Without waiting for a response, Emily bowed slightly to the man and led him to a cozy table by the window. She pulled out a chair for him, set down a menu, and soon brought him a warm glass of water. "If you need anything, sir, please don't hesitate to call me." The man looked up at her. In his deep, weathered eyes, a gentle warmth flickered, as if he saw something rare and precious. He simply nodded, offering a faint but genuine smile. A few minutes later, Christopher received a brief text message from a private number. "I am here. I have seen enough. I will meet you after dinner." He froze. Immediately, his eyes swept across the restaurant. Instead of a distinguished guest in a designer suit, as he had imagined, his gaze landed on the shabby old man sitting quietly, being kindly served by Emily. A wave of unease washed over Christopher. He stood silently, observing from a distance. That night, after the restaurant had closed and the last tables were cleared, Christopher received a phone call. A deep, calm voice spoke on the other end. "This is Raymond Harris, chairman of Harris Investments. Congratulations, Mr. Miller. Tonight, I didn't come to judge your food. I came to judge how you and your staff treat strangers." Christopher held his breath. Raymond continued, "Someone made me feel truly welcome tonight, not your arrogant girlfriend. It was that young waitress, Emily." There was a long, heavy pause. Christopher felt a tightness in his chest. Raymond's voice softened with a hint of warmth. "I will sign the investment deal, but on one condition. Don't ever forget to cherish people like her." The call ended. Christopher set down his phone, his heart a storm of emotions. And at that moment, he understood. The very girl he had once doubted, once coldly distanced, had just saved the future of Miller's, and perhaps had begun to thaw the ice around his own heart. The next day, New York City was draped in a gentle rain. Thin, silken droplets slanted through the streetlights, painting the city in soft, muted gray. In that quiet world, at Miller's restaurant, a silent conversation was about to unfold, a conversation that could change everything. The dinner shift ended late. The last guests left, leaving the restaurant empty, bathed in the soft, golden glow of chandeliers. Emily moved between tables, quietly clearing glasses, her figure small and almost invisible. From the bar, Christopher Miller approached, holding a black umbrella and a neatly folded coat. Emily was gathering up empty glasses when she heard the steady sound of approaching footsteps. She looked up, her brown eyes meeting the deep, familiar blue of his. "Emily," Christopher called gently. His voice was different today, lower, warmer, almost uncertain. Emily stood straight, gripping the hem of her apron tightly, wary. Christopher stopped in front of her, his expression serious. "I have something to say." She remained silent, waiting, her deep brown eyes unwavering. For a moment, he hesitated. Then, with a sincerity rarely seen in him, Christopher said, "I'm sorry." Emily froze. She had never imagined she would hear those words from this man, the man she once thought too proud, too distant to ever admit fault. Christopher continued, his voice steady and low. "I was wrong to doubt you, wrong to believe idle whispers without seeking the truth. If you hadn't stood up that night, Miller's would have lost its greatest opportunity. He raised his gaze, looking straight into her eyes, and there was something raw and earnest there. You didn't just save this restaurant. You reminded me of something important, that a person's worth isn't measured by appearances, but by the heart they carry inside. Emily bit her lower lip, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. She had endured so much misunderstanding. She had grown so used to being overlooked, belittled, but now, for the first time, someone truly saw her kindness, saw her strength, saw the real her, behind all the scars life had dealt. Christopher held out the coat. It's raining. Let me walk you home. Emily hesitated. A part of her wanted to refuse, out of pride, out of fear. But his eyes, so free of arrogance now, softened her resolve. She nodded gently. Christopher smiled. A small, warm smile, softer than any city light that night. He opened the door, raised the umbrella above her, and together they stepped out into the thin rain. The streets of New York late at night were almost deserted. The neon lights blurred under the rain, turning the world into a misty watercolor painting. They walked side by side without speaking. Only the soft tapping of their footsteps echoed against the empty sidewalks. The rain beaded in Emily's hair, clung to her eyelashes like tiny diamonds. Christopher glanced at her, feeling a strange tightening in his chest. A small girl, alone in a city that could be so cruel, yet still carrying herself with dignity, with kindness, with a light that refused to be extinguished. And he, a man who once prided himself on his coldness, now found himself wanting to step closer to reach out and touch that light. When they reached the old apartment building where Emily lived, she stopped, turning to face him. Christopher stood still for a moment, then spoke, his voice low. I owe you a proper dinner, not as boss and employee, but as two people who truly want to know each other. Emily smiled slightly, a fragile, gentle smile, like the first sun after a long winter. I'll think about it, she said softly, and quickly slipped inside. Christopher remained standing there, watching her disappear behind the door. And under the rainy night sky of New York, a small, tender seed had quietly begun to grow. No ruse, no grand gestures, just quietly, naturally, the way the most beautiful things in life always begin. In the days that followed, Christopher began to notice more. Not just about Emily, but about everything he had once carelessly overlooked. A silent undercurrent stirred within him, and the cracks in his relationship with Vanessa grew more visible with each passing day. Vanessa still wore her perfect smile, still whispered sweet nothings, still clung to him affectionately. But every gesture, every look from her now felt hollow, foreign. That evening, the restaurant hosted a small celebration for its anniversary. Guests mingled, champagne flowed, laughter filled the air. Christopher stood alone by the second-floor balcony, a glass of champagne in hand, his gaze drifting absently over the crowd. Across the room, he spotted Vanessa laughing and chatting animatedly with a circle of high society friends. On the surface, she was flawless as ever. But something in her laughter sent an odd chill down his spine. Just then, his phone buzzed softly in his pocket. He reached for it, but paused as he caught Vanessa's voice, unexpectedly close by. She was giggling, talking on her phone, completely unaware he was within earshot. And every word she said slammed into him like a blow. As soon as he signs that investment deal, you and I will take everything. He's such an idiot. So easy to fool. Don't worry, baby. Soon, Miller's will be ours. Her laughter rang out, sharp, cruel, dripping with greed. Christopher froze. His hand tightened around his champagne glass until his knuckles turned white. The drink spilled over the rim, dripping onto his polished shoes. The blood in his veins turned to ice. Images flooded back. The subtle nudges from Vanessa to sign contracts. The overly sweet words. The malicious glances she threw at Emily. Everything, finally, made sense. Vanessa had never loved him. She loved his money, his power, the dream of ruling over everything he had built. And Emily, the quiet girl whom Vanessa had once publicly humiliated, was the very one who had saved Miller's. And perhaps something even more precious. Christopher inhaled deeply, a cold fury burning through him like wildfire. He turned sharply and strode across the room toward Vanessa, unwavering. She was sending a text to her secret lover when she glanced up and spotted him. "Oh, darling," she chirped, waving. But Christopher did not smile. Not even a flicker. He stopped before her, his face carved from stone. "We need to talk." Vanessa frowned slightly, but plastered on her flirtatious smile. "Now? I'm a little busy. Now." His voice was like steel. Christopher grabbed her arm and pulled her out of the main hall into a quiet corridor behind a restaurant. Without giving her a chance to speak, he pulled out his phone and pressed play. Vanessa's own voice filled the silence, naked and vile. "As soon as he signs that investment deal, you and I will take everything." Vanessa went pale. "Chris, it's not what it sounds like. Not what it sounds like." Christopher gave a short, bitter laugh. "You think I'm that stupid?" Vanessa burst into tears, reaching out to grab his hand. "I love you. It was just a stupid joke." Christopher stepped back, as if recoiling from something poisonous. He looked at her, really looked at her, and spoke in a low, deadly voice. "From this moment on, you're out of my life, and out of Miller's." The finality in his words was absolute. Vanessa sobbed, begged, clung, but Christopher had already turned away, walking off without a backward glance. Every step felt like shedding another heavy chain that had bound him for far too long. Back in the main hall, Christopher's eyes swept over the crowd instinctively. And then he saw her, Emily. She stood quietly in a corner, clearing empty glasses, her slender figure outlined by the warm golden light. Her brown hair shimmered softly, her movements graceful, unpretentious. No false glitter, no games, just a pure, quiet strength. For the first time in a very long time, Christopher smiled. A real, genuine smile that reached deep into his chest. He knew the ugliness was behind him now, and something truly beautiful, something real, was waiting for him just ahead. A week later, New York seemed to wear a new coat. Spring slipped through every street corner, every small flower bed along the sidewalks, through the hurried footsteps of passers-by. That evening, Emily finished her shift as usual. She was clearing the tables, ready to leave, when a coworker approached her with a mysterious smile. "Emily, could you come over to the stage area for a moment?" Emily, puzzled, set down her tray and made her way toward the small stage, where the familiar Steinway grand piano sat quietly. But tonight, everything was different. Soft, golden lights bathed the stage. A small, beautifully decorated birthday cake sat on a table draped in white linen. Around it, tiny candles flickered like 1,000 stars brought down to earth. Standing there was Christopher, dressed simply but elegantly, holding a bouquet of fresh lavender. His eyes lit up as he saw her approach. Emily stopped in her tracks, hardly believing what she was seeing. Christopher smiled and walked toward her. "Happy birthday, Emily." His voice was warm, sincere, and tinged with a shy awkwardness that made her heart ache. Emily covered her mouth, her eyes wide with emotion. For years, her birthdays had passed unnoticed. No cakes, no flowers, no warm wishes. And now, in this cold, sprawling city, someone had quietly prepared all of this for her. Every candle, every bloom of lavender. Christopher handed her the bouquet, then gently pulled out a chair for her. He sat down at the piano, his fingers brushing lightly over the keys, before looking up with a sheepish smile. "I don't know how to play, but tonight, I want to hear you." Emily laughed through her tears. She sat down, her fingers caressing the cool keys she had once known so well. In the quiet space, she began to play, a melody she had composed long ago, back when she was a little girl by the Charles River, dreaming of happiness. The music floated through the air, soft and tender, carrying every emotion she had buried deep inside her heart. Christopher sat across from her, listening intently, never taking his eyes off her. In that moment, he knew, if there was any music that could heal his heart, it was this. And if there was any person he wanted to walk beside for the rest of his life, it was the girl sitting before him now. The song ended. Emily lifted her hands from the keys, raising her gaze to meet his, her brown eyes shimmering like a lake under the moonlight. Christopher stood. He walked slowly toward her, took a deep breath, as if gathering all the courage he had ever known. Then he knelt down on one knee. Emily gasped softly. Christopher took her hand in his voice trembling slightly, but his eyes unwavering. "Emily Carter, I spent so many years searching for what was truly precious. And it turns out it was right here all along. I just needed to open my heart to see it." He paused, holding her gaze. "I love you, not because you saved Millers, not because you play beautiful music, but because of who you are, strong, kind, simple, and more radiant than anyone I've ever known." Tears filled Emily's eyes. She had endured so much loneliness, so much misunderstanding. And now, someone had truly, deeply seen her. Christopher squeezed her hand, waiting, his heart hammering. 1 second, and then Emily nodded, a brilliant smile breaking through her tears. "I love you too." Just 4 words, but enough to make Christopher feel that the world was finally, utterly complete. He stood, pulling her into his arms. Amid the flickering candlelight, the soft music lingering in the air, and the vast city outside holding its breath, they found each other. And this time they knew they would never let go again.